This is a first for us, a 5-in-1 welder. More on this when we get back. I'm Tim Johnson. You're watching Shop Tool Reviews. So how do you get a 5-in-1 welder? Well, YesWelder is going to show us. They have their FIRSTESS MP200. So yes, a 200 amp multi-process welder with a big asterisk after that, because it's not just a welder, it's also a plasma cutter. So in addition to getting all your, I shouldn't say all, but you know, the majority of your welding processes here in one unit, you also get a plasma cutter. So you're doing this all from this unit at 110 volts. Oh yeah, by the way, it runs on dual voltage. So you can either run at 110 volts or plug in the little adapter here and run this off of 220 volts, and you get your full 200 amps of output for your welding and your cutting. Now, in the cutting side of the plasma side of things, with compressed air and 220 volts, you're supposed to be able to cut up to a 1/2 inch of steel, and then on the welding side, weld up to a 1/4 inch. Now, you cannot weld aluminum with this. This is a DC only welder, so you're not going to be able to weld with your TIG or your MIG. You're not going to be able to run a spool gun or run an AC TIG torch to be able to weld aluminum. So this is considered a hobbyist welder, or kind of that beginner's welder, if you will, for that novice and that upstart person, or that DIYer. You're running this out of your home shop, or maybe just getting started in welding. This is really going to offer you kind of the whole thing in one bag, if you will. So you can do your TIG and your MIG and your cutting and stick welding as well. Let's dig into it. Let's take a closer look at these features, which, by the way, let me explain to you, I'm not getting a dime off of this welder at all. In fact, YesWelder, they actually contacted us and said, hey, can we send you out an early unit for this? In fact, this is not even really supposed to release until around September, but they have an early release right now on Kickstarter. So they are trying to raise some money to up production, if you will, but they are coming out with this welder. So they did ask me, hey, can we send it to you? Give us your first impression, give us, or give the people your first impression, and let them know what you think of the features and such. And that's it. Not making any money off this because it is on Kickstarter. So again, just wanted full disclosure there. So they did send me the unit, but there are no affiliates on this unit while it's on Kickstarter. And I think on Kickstarter you're going to get an early bird, not I think, you are getting an early bird price, which is a much better than what the actual MSRP is going to be. We'll cover that here in a moment, as well as the warranty after we talk about the features. As we mentioned in the intro, this is the FIRSTESS MP200 Multiprocess welder and cutter from YesWelder. Now, YesWelder is not new to the multi-process game. They've been making them for a while now, and they make some very value-oriented machines in the multi-process level, but I think this is topping them all, at least on the user interface side, and obviously we're adding a cutting function as well. So we get MIG, we get Flux Core, we get stick welding, TIG welding, and then plasma cutting as well, all in this unit. Now this unit operates on either 110 volts, or with the plug adapter, you can bump that up to 220 volts as well, and that's going to up your output to the full 200 amps. I believe we're getting 160 amps with the 110. Now, also, if I didn't mention it, we are only going to be going over the features on this machine. We'll have an in-use review of the different processes that we'll link in the description once we do that, but just didn't want to throw you off. I don't want this video being 30, 45 minutes long. I want to keep it quick, run through all the features, all the different things that come with this in this video. So let's get to it. I'm going to plug the machine in, and let's talk about a few things. Before we look at that, we're going to notice right here on the front of the machine, we have a big LCD screen here, and then we have our different inputs here. Euro connector, I love to see that. And then we have 3 different 25 DINS connectors, and then a little 2-prong, look like almost like a serial port. And then obviously this is for our gas cutting, which will be our compressed air that's coming through here. Now let's turn around to the back of the machine real quick. This shouldn't take long. And right here on the back of the machine, we see right away we have dual fans on this. Now, these fans, I believe, are both going to run all the time. There's no, automated triggers on this. You plug the machine in. Once we turn it on, both those fans will come on. They're pretty loud, or at least right here in the camera, it's going to be loud, so I don't want to turn them on just yet. But anyway, dual fans, I like to see that. Keep our electronics cool, keep them living. These two studs here, this is for the actual plasma cutting or the air input. And actually you get with the machine an air dryer, so you want to keep the moisture out of your air. That will kill a plasma cutter really quickly, so make sure that you're running a dryer. Now you may have a dryer in your air system, but it never hurts to have one right here on the unit as well. Very easy to set this up. You see this little tang here, it goes right there in that notch. And then we put that little plastic nut back on. And okay, we got that on. Then we have the actual air output. And we want to make sure that we orient this correctly. So your air actually flows this way. You've got a little arrow right here. So our air input will be over here. And by the way, that will actually not come with the machine. So you'll need your 1/4 inch NPT and a little Teflon tape. We'll go on this side. And by the way, you're also supplied an air pressure gauge and 2 of these hose fittings, as well as even, I believe it's like 6 or 8 feet of hose, and hose clamps, O-rings, and even some Teflon tape or PTFE tape. And this makes no sense, but we'll flip this around because that's where the opening port is. And then we'll put our air fitting on, which will be the output actually to the unit. And then we just have to run our hose from here to right here. And now once pressurized, our actual clean out here will actually pop down. And then when we want to clean that out, we can just hit it and it'll actually blow out any water that we get trapped in there. Make sure you clear that out routinely, I would say every time you turn the unit on. So our air pressure will actually go in here, our air will come in here and then out here to the unit. We also have a Mig Gas Input, so your mixed gas, your CO2 argon will go in here for the Mig Gas. You do not have a TIG gas input on the back of the machine here. That will be separate. So let's go ahead and kick the machine on. We'll see the fans fire up. So now we see both fans have now fired up on the machine. And by the way, both of those, I believe, are drawing in. So they're drawing in here. And this is where we're exhausting, is out the side of the machine here. So both fans are drawing in and exhausting out the side, keeping all the electronics cool. I'm going to turn that back off. Now just to give you an idea of the size of this machine, handle and all, you're looking at less than 16 inches, so probably 15.5 inches tall. And then front to back of the machine, right at 18 inches. If you look at the air regulator, maybe about 21 inches, but still pretty compact unit. And width-wise with the plastic and all, right at 8 inches. So 8 by 18 by 15.5 tall. Now let's look at the weight of this machine. Get our scales here. So even with the regulator on it, and we will go to pounds and ounces. 26 pounds, 10 ounces. So just a little over 26.5 pounds for a multi-process 5-in-1 welder and cutter. Let's get a look at the other side of the machine before we look at the interface. So this will be where we access our spool. And so just with a little flip of the switch there, we can fold this down and we get access to where we can run our 1 and 2 pound spools as well as our 10 pound and larger spools in here as well. This is reverse thread, if that even matters to you. So again, you can run really whatever spool size you want, either the small or the 10 pounders. Pretty typical MIG design here. So we have a spring-loaded tensioner here where we can increase the spring tension on the rollers. You can flip that down. You don't have to loosen it. You can just flip it down, and it's going to open up the rollers to then we can access the actual roller for the wire that we're going to run. So always make sure that you're running the correct size roller for the wire that you're running. And if I pull this off, these are dual-sided rollers. So we have a 0.9 and a 0.8 on either side. So whether you're running 030 or 035 wire, that's going to matter as to what size you have it on. Also, we get an extra roller here. And this is also a 0.9 or a 0.8. Probably one of them's grooved. Yes, one of them's smooth and one of them's grooved. So you'll want the groove when you're running Flux Core wire. And so we'll put the smooth back in here, since we'll probably be running gas all the time on this machine. So very easy to access this. And this is typical to a lot of your MIG machines, so I'm not going to really run through any particulars here. Let's first take a look at what we get with the FIRSTESS MP200 machine. So we get a work lead or our ground clamp. It's an 025 DINS connector. Yeah, nice spring on that clamp. That's better than others that I've seen for sure. I believe they say it's a 300 amp ground clamp. But anyway, so we get a 25 DINS connector ground clamp. As I pointed out already, we also get the adapter for running our 110 or 220 volts. So we can bump that up to 220 volts, get more output, be able to weld thicker steel, cut thicker steel, you get it. We also get our stick lead, so our electrode holder, also an 025 or 25 DINS connector, and I believe this may be a 150 amp electrode lead, but anyway, so we get electrode lead. Decent clamp on that as well, or decent spring on that as well. Nothing that I can gripe about on that electrode lead either. Then we get to the Mig Gun. On the Mig Gun, we get a couple of extra tips, as well as we get, I believe that's a 150 amp torch as well. Yeah, I believe this is a 150 torch. And it's kind of a Tweco style torch. They have some really nice torches with YesWelder. I've been pretty impressed with them, especially in their, their hobbyist welders, some of the features and functions, as well as even the components, I'm impressed with. I love the Euro style connector here on the machine and on the torch. It makes it really, really easy, and they function very well also. So really nice MIG torch like that. On the TIG side, we get a number 17 torch. It is not flexible, so it's rigid. We also have our gas supply here for our argon. So manually they're controlled with this little thumb screw. We get a small consumables kit as well. No tungstens in there, but as far as we get a couple of cups or a few cups and some tips as well. And then this is for our separate argon supply. So this will not plug into the machine, or this will not screw into the machine. This will be going to your actual regulator. Or an extended hose or whatever coming off your regulator. And then this 25 DINS connector is going to plug in the front of the machine also. So again, number 17 TIG torch here. And then on the plasma side of things, another pretty impressive gun here, I must say. Again, for what we're getting, or for the value that we're getting in this and the price that we're paying for it, very good looking plasma cutting torch here. Looks a lot like their Mig Gun as far as colors and theme. And then I believe we also, we get some consumables here as well. Looks like a couple extra cups, and so and then the actual contact tips in there also comes with the gun. So let's take a look here. So here's our contact tip, and then an insulator. A swirl ring, and your cup on, and we have an O-ring in there. So nice setup. And then here's our safety guard, if you will, for pulling the trigger. Okay, so that's basically everything that we get as far as the accessories with the torch, which is a lot of stuff. Now let's take a look at the interface. Okay, again, we're going to fire it up. Flip the switch in the back. See a little home screen, little theme coming at you there, the YesWelder logo, and then it looks like we're right there on the MMA or stick. So let's press the home button. That home button should take us to the home. So imagine that. So here's where we select our different processes as well as settings. So if we wanted to go into to stick or MMA, we can do that. Then we wanted to go to settings, plasma cutting, lift TIG. So by the way, it is a lift TIG. I think I may have mentioned that. So we have no pedal, and it's not scratch TIG. It's just going to be a lift TIG process. And then we're going to have our gasless welding, or FCAW. So that's where we're going to have Flux Core wire. And then our typical MIG. So our gas welding with wire feed. So typical argon CO2. And then back to our stick. So let's go into the settings on the Mig mode. So all I'm going to do is push the button to select. So it says select. We're going to push. And then now we're in the home screen for MIG settings, if you will. And we can adjust everything we see on the screen here. If we would just wanted to adjust amperage, you can see our synergic settings. It's going to, as we increase amperage, it's also going to increase our wire feed speed as well. So let's actually take a look and just kind of walk through the functions here. So right now we're highlighted. If I hit select, it's highlighting our gas. So I'm going to go in and say, no, we're not doing argon. We're going to do argon CO2, 75% argon, 25% CO2. So now it's selected that. And then I can go over and say, okay, what are we doing as far as our wire? Are we doing steel or stainless steel? I can go to steel. And then are we doing 030 or 035? I'll go to 030. And then we can also do a 2T or a 4T type of trigger setup. I'm going to say, hit the trigger and I'm welding, let off the trigger. I'm not welding, so I'm going to leave it on 2T. Then I can go over to the metal thickness and say, okay, what size metal am I welding? 14 gauge or 10 gauge? I did notice there's not an 11 gauge option there, so if you're welding 11, probably best to go to 10 gauge, and then 3/16, quarter inch, and so on. Now that would probably when you're getting in that 3/16 and up mode, that's going to be only if you're plugged into 220. So I'm going to go in here and say, well, I'm welding 10 gauge, and then I can even set the burn back. And I also have a memory setting there where I can actually have different memory settings depending on the different types of processes that I'm doing or types of welding. Because actually, I will get 10 memory settings for MIG, 10 for TIG, 10 and so on and so forth. So you can have 10 memory settings in each one of the processes. So now with nothing selected over there, now I have the option now that I can trim my voltage and up my voltage for, let's say, that process. So I'm actually trimming those synergic settings so that I'm a little hotter or a little colder, a little more wire feed, a little less, if you will. So now I'm actually trimming my voltage, and as to whatever target we're hitting, I can trim that to exactly how much I want there, either negative or positive, up to 5 whole numbers. So if I leave it at 0 for that 10 gauge welding, we're at 100 amps and we're at 16.6 volts. I can also trim that up or trim that back down. And again, you see our synergic settings, it's changing my voltage. And again, if I wanted to set that trim, I could up that and give me a little more if I want to on the voltage side, or a little less. So let's go back to our home screen and let's go to Flux Core. I don't do a lot of Flux Core, so I'll just kind of bump through here. Same thing here. If we go in, we can select our steel 030 or 035, 2-touch, 4-touch, our metal thickness, and then even our burn back and our memory settings. And then again, we can have our synergic settings here as well. And we can up our amperage as well as trim our voltage as well. Go back into lift TIG. And on the lift TIG side, we don't have a lot of custom settings. We basically can set our amperage, and it's recognizing our input voltage as 110 volts. If I were plugged into 220, it would recognize it as 220. So That's basically it. We'll set our post-flow and we can set our pre-flow and post-flow on the actual TIG torch itself since it has a knob. So there's no pre-flow, post-flow, because the gas is actually not going through the machine. So the lift TIG side, pretty simple setup here. By the way, you'll also notice that right here on the screen, it's showing us where the electrodes should be plugged into the machine, whether they're positive or negative. Back to the home screen, and then lastly is our plasma cutting. So on the plasma cutting side, we can actually set pre-flow and post-flow. So how many seconds? So I'm going to say just 2 seconds pre, and post, I'm going to say 5 seconds. And then again on here, we can do 2-touch or 4-touch. I'm going to leave it on 2-touch. And again, we can have a memory setting for that also. Then we can go in and select our amperage, which we're maxed out at 30 amps at 110. If we were at 220, then we would get up to the full 40 amps, which they're claiming 1/2-inch steel with 40 amps. I would say safe to bet, say 3/16 and smaller, 3/8 inch and smaller. But again, as a hobbyist welder or a beginner welder, rarely are you getting into that 1/2-inch steel anyway. So again, at 110 volts, we're getting 30 amps of cutting and 40 amps at the 220 volts. Back to our home screen, and let's go into settings. And from settings, we can select either inch or millimeters. So we can set, are we, using the metric scales or using the inch scales, which that's great because a lot of the other YesWelders, they only have the option in millimeters, and so you'd have to kind of make that conversion yourself. And then we have a factory reset there. So we're going to select inches and go back. So very easy to roll through here. And this interface, by the way, is much better than the old interfaces on YesWelder. Not that there were any problems with those. I'm just telling you this is much easier. And I believe we get more functionality here as well. And by the way, something else that came on this machine is you have a cover here that actually clips up here to the top. But I find myself all the time lifting it up and taking it off, so that's why I had this off. But you do have a cover that actually comes to the machine, and it just clips up here on the front of the unit. Okay, so feature-wise, for a novice welder, for a beginner welder, if you will, or for that person that's getting their feet wet in welding, this is a great idea. And the fact that you're going to get a plasma cutter in there as well, hey, huge bonus there. We think this is a great idea. And one thing we really like about YesWelder is they know where they are. They know where their placement is. They're not trying to say that they're the best at any of these things or all of these things. They're saying, hey, we know that if we can reach out to that hobbyist or that kind of novice welder, if you will, we can kind of hit a bunch of things with one stone and keep from having, you having a huge shop to have to house just your welding equipment. And also cost-wise, keep you from having to buy a plasma cutter, buy a TIG welder, buy a Mig welder, and so forth. So you kind of get all that rolled up into one. They realize that. YesWelder realizes that. So they're not trying to compete with the best of the best in each part of the industry. They're trying to give you something that has some great components, as well as going to last you a while, and is going to provide you a lot of different processes you can do. And I think they've done that well. Now, we will actually be releasing another video where we're showing this in use because, quite frankly, we didn't want a 45-minute video. We know you guys don't like to watch that stuff, so we're trying to keep it in that 20-minute range and cover all the features here, and then we'll have a link to the actual in-use and an actual review of the product, if you will. Now, pricing on this, early bird pricing, as we mentioned, it is on Kickstarter. And by the way, we'll link to the actual YesWelder page, and then they can link you to Kickstarter if you want to see it there. But early bird, I believe there was an initial pricing at $4.99. I believe all those are gone. There's like a limited number, and I think it's like $5.49 now. So or maybe even $5.20. Regardless, a little over $500. So for $5.49, you're getting everything that we covered here. The welder, all the different torches, your TIG torch, your Mig torch, your plasma, stick electrode, all of that stuff, even down to the Teflon tape for $549, and you get a 1-year warranty. Now that's hard to beat. I will say that it looks like the MSRP is going to be somewhere around $1,000. Again, still cheap when you look at what the different units you would have to purchase to actually accomplish what this is going to accomplish. Stay tuned and make sure you check out our video of the in-use review. Make sure you check out this unit. Also keep track of us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. And if you liked our video, would you hit that like, thumbs up button? Also, if you haven't subscribed already, will you think about, or maybe even just subscribe to our channel? But by all means, if you hated our video, if you didn't like it, then give us a thumbs down. But would you let us know in the comments why? Have a great day and keep smiling.